Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Jogonet video interview. Today we are joined by Sandra Douglas Morgan. She's the chairwoman of the Nevada Gaming Control Board. So, well, thank you very much for joining us today, Sandra. We can start talking about it's been over 2 months since the Nevada casinos were cleared to reopen. We've seen many new COVID-19 cases in July in the jurisdiction. So how would you assess casino operators and visitors to respond to the new guidelines and restrictions? What were the positive and negative aspects so far, and maybe things to correct since June 4?
Well, I think that overall, now that we're about well over 2 months after reopening, people, when they're coming to Las Vegas, and definitely Nevada residents, when they go to gaming properties, know what to expect. For the last 3 to 4 weeks now, the governor has actually imposed a face covering requirement. So everyone knows, even if you're going to a casino or not, that you need to wear a face covering in order to go to a business. And it allows businesses the ability to refuse service. And prior to the governor's kind of statewide mandated face covering, where the board did require face coverings, obviously for all gaming employees and for table game patrons, because the CDC came out with a guidance, I think in mid-June, after we had reopened on June 4th, saying that the coronavirus obviously can spread if you're within 6 feet of someone for more than 15 minutes. And so obviously with a very large table game presence in our casinos, we implemented that as well. So I do think in June it was difficult. Obviously, unfortunately, we had some interactions with guests who did not want to wear face coverings, or if you have a medical condition, they have the option to wear a face shield. But now that we're 2 months in, I think people know what to expect. They know that if they are not properly socially distanced or don't have a facial covering, that they're likely going to get a tap on their shoulder and being asked to leave, or being told to wear one. Now, with regard to revenues, for June, we did see, I think, a decent amount of gaming growth, but it's nowhere near what we're used to, with, unfortunately, shows and entertainment still being shuttered in Nevada. We actually saw some smaller properties. Their gaming revenue was just as good as it was last year. But I think that's going to start to taper off a little bit too. Nevada, we're right now in the last week or so, we've kind of plateaued, but we know that, obviously things unfortunately could spike again. So we still have a lot of protections, and there's a lot of governor's directives with regard to social distancing and the closure of bars that are still in place today.
Right. Based on this, you have over 150 investigations in place, including the one with the filed complaints against Sara and other cases. What have you learned so far? What patterns have you seen, or further insights could you share in terms of these violations and investigations? And what scenario could Nevada casinos face or be at risk of facing a new closures in the future?
Well, yeah, I don't want to comment on current pending disciplinary matters that we have, but overall, generally, as you mentioned, we've had now it's probably in the realm of 170 regulatory violations that are specifically related to the coronavirus. And those measures range from everything to guests not wearing masks. Obviously, employees should have been wearing masks even well before June 4th, before they were opened, not having proper social distancing. Clearly, again, at table games, that's a clear violation. We cannot have, right now in Nevada, there's no public or private gatherings that can exceed 50 people. So, that's been very clear, and it's been in the directive for quite some time. So those are the type of issues we're looking at. A lot of times if we interact with a licensee and we tell them, we see a couple of patrons over there that aren't wearing face coverings, 9 times out of 10, someone will go over there right away and be on it. We understand that it's difficult to regulate third-party behavior, but there has to be an attempt on the licensee to take that seriously. And so, employees, training, temperature checks, those are all things that they can easily do that are within their control. If you see just, 10, 15, 20 people walking around a casino floor without proper face coverings, we know that the licensee needs to take a stronger approach to make sure that people are being safe. All of these guidelines are to ensure that there's not a burden on Nevada's healthcare system, and to ensure that these businesses can continue to stay open. I mentioned earlier that bars were closed about 3 weeks ago, and that affects obviously a lot of small businesses and a lot of employees as well. And so I know that the governor and the counties are want to take a more targeted approach at ensuring that those bad actors are closed and not necessarily being a detriment to the rest of the industry. So, enforcement, I will tell you, we're used to dealing with, patron disputes and much more significant type of gaming type crimes, not necessarily, health and safety policies, but we understand the importance it is not only to the gaming industry, but the gaming industry being the business, being the biggest and largest in Nevada. It's important that, those bad actors be addressed so that the rest of the industry can continue to operate.
Sure. Yeah. Well, last month, the Nevada Casino Union workers, they called on the governor and lawmakers and also the companies to do a little more to protect them. Well, this week we heard that the governor signed a legislation in that regard, providing safety protections for workers and also protecting the companies from potential lawsuits related to COVID-19. So what do you think? And this was also very, very welcomed by the American Gaming Association, which wants to take this to a national level. So what impact do you think this new law will have on the Nevada casino industry? And maybe we can have your opinion about this.
Sure. Well, that was legislation, obviously, that was passed by the Assembly and the Senate, and the governor did sign that bill into law this week. With regard to the Gaming Control Board, we are the gaming regulators, and so it allows us to work very closely with health districts and medical professionals to obtain their guidance and their recommendations. And in all honesty, they have already given this to us. I have never run across any local health district or hospital who wasn't willing and able to share their best practices with the Gaming Control Board so we can ensure we're doing proper regulations. And so the bill that was passed obviously was very well received by the business community, because I know with the worker protections, it specifically addresses public accommodations, but with regard to the business liability protections, it covers a very wide range of businesses. And so that was important to be able to allow them to reopen and allow them to not have the concern that their businesses could be shuttered because of one large lawsuit that was related to COVID. But with respect to the worker protections, I know that was also very welcomed by union groups here in Nevada, and we have that task the Health and Human Services Department to actually create and promulgate regulations specific to public accommodation facilities and how they're going to be cleaned. And I think that process will likely occur in the next couple of weeks. We will definitely take a look at those. They're the experts in that field, and see what, if any, needs to be incorporated in the gaming regulations. But in Nevada, the Gaming Control Board does have the enforcement ability to, and then the regulatory ability to call a licensee forward or discipline a licensee if they violate any federal, state, or local laws. So for example, if they were to currently violate maybe a health district regulation or a health code and they're a gaming licensee, that would be enough for the Gaming Control Board to look at and see if their gaming license could be disciplined for that as well.
Right, sure. Well, we recently spoken with David Eisensox, who is the VP of Spectrum Gaming Capital, and he was analyzing the Nevada industry these days. He's seen profitability is much higher, is doubling margins for operators due to maybe mostly due to pent-up demand. But he sees that gaming destinations such as Las Vegas, unlike other regional markets, they will take more time to recover their economies. So he said that maybe it takes a couple of years due to the reliance on air travel. Yeah. So what do you think? What do you take from these outlooks, and what's the role and impact that pent-up demand, the new restrictions, and also online gaming and sports betting, now that sports are returning, are having on this scenario?
Yeah, unfortunately, Nevada is the, I shouldn't say unfortunately, we are the largest commercial casino gaming jurisdiction in the U.S. And I don't think anyone thought that this pandemic would last as long as it had. Initially, we said we thought we would have a recovery within 12 to 24 months, and I think that could be now anywhere between 18 and 36 months. Obviously, as you mentioned, the Las Vegas Strip is very reliant on air travel, and but I think that they will focus the marketing more on drive-in markets as well. Obviously, regional markets are going to recover much faster than destinations are going to recover, as you mentioned. I know that our operators are trying to be creative and looking at staycations. And, now that everyone's working remotely, you can work remotely in a Las Vegas or a Reno hotel because the connectivity is great. You can work during the day and still enjoy the pool and some other, events at night. And I think that the operators are going to definitely be more innovative. We've seen a lot of um, potential for how maybe a game, if you're playing in a game and someone can sense that it's on, the next one next to you is off, to ensure social distancing. Even if we get to a point where there is medicine or a vaccine, I still think people are going to be a bit cautious, but I do think people will want to come back and have a good time when that time comes. So yes, I do think Las Vegas will take some time to recover. We've been able to recover from other unfortunate events, whether it be 9/11 or the recession or the horrible 1 October shooting, and I'm pretty sure that we'll be able to reinvent ourselves again as well.
We hope so. One of the major news we've covered these days was the El Dorado Caesars merger. New Jersey was the last regulator to approve this. The New Jersey division, they cited certain concerns about the uncertainty of these times and the timetable to recover and the general crisis in tourism industry. What are your expectations for this new combined company, especially in its impact in Nevada, and if you share any of those concerns that they had in the past?
We actually did share the concerns. And, Nevada had a special meeting, I think a week or two before New Jersey, not only for our board, but for our commission as well, and definitely asked several questions about the financial viability of El Dorado Caesars and why would combining two, relatively healthy companies, combining them into one in the middle of a global pandemic, why that would be a good decision, and not only for the company but for regulators to approve as well. And I think they did a really good job talking about the synergies that could take place between both companies. Caesars has, I think, about 60% of their revenues from regional markets, 40% being from Las Vegas. They clearly have a very strong presence in Las Vegas, and their corporate headquarters will be in Reno, so their corporate offices will be in Nevada as well. And so we talked about and consider the fact that Caesars is going to be the largest gaming company, but potentially with the first or second largest employer, just general employer in the state of Nevada. And they assured us that they were going to make the requisite capital improvements that were needed for the Las Vegas and Reno properties. They understand that there is very high competition in Nevada, and in order for them to continue to attract, whether it be domestic or international visitors, that they would have to ensure that their properties are kept in very good conditions with the latest and greatest, entertainment and gaming offerings that they have. And I think they did a really good job kind of on the record talking about their ability to realize the synergies that they've made in prior mergers and how that could be applied to Nevada. They're also obviously going to have a bigger player marketing reach and player base. And so I definitely have high hopes for them. I think they did a good job before the board and commission, assuring them that they understand the importance that Nevada has for their entire company. And I'm looking forward to seeing great things from that.
Right. There are two topics that maybe there are not being so discussed these days. There are illegal market and problem gambling amid this pandemic. Have you seen any patterns or changes in these on those two areas these days?
Well, for illegal gambling, that's something that the Gaming Control Board is always going to be focused on. Obviously, there's some jurisdictional challenges with regard to bringing cases against some of those, the offshore betting sites and legal markets. Actually, though, in 2019, the legislature, at our request, actually passed a bill allowing us to wiretap, the board to wiretap in conjunction with the district attorney and the attorney general to address illegal gambling. And so I'm very glad that our enforcement division is working with other law enforcement officials. And obviously we are on many task forces with the FBI and the IRS to hopefully kind of have another avenue to be able to tackle online and illegal gambling. So that's a good thing. And that was a law that was actually passed last year. With respect to problem gambling, when we reopened on June 4th, we included in our health and safety guidelines, obviously a requirement. We know that there has to be information posted available at every gaming facility with regard to problem gambling. But something that I specifically requested be included was that when casinos submit their reopening plan to the board, that they include their commitment to problem gambling and what they're going to do to enhance their responsible gaming efforts. And so we got great feedback from that, on not only for operators asking us, what exactly are you looking for, or would these additional measures, be something that the board would consider. Additionally, when we allowed cashless wagering or additional regulations for that in our technical standards, we included a requirement that they had to include problem gambling information and additional resources for players and patrons to use if they have any questions about problem gambling or what the requirements are. And as far as those other technical standards that I just mentioned with regard to being able to wager or have wagering accounts on your phone, as of February of 2021, there also has to be a limit on those devices to not be able to increase your wagering amount if you set a certain limit within a 24-hour period. So I think Nevada definitely could do more with regard to responsible gaming. That isn't something we've traditionally kind of been the leader on, but we're definitely want to, especially as we go to a more of an online presence where people are actually wagering and doing sports betting on their phones. There are definitely more protections that can be made in that area.
Great, great. The American Gaming Association recently released a report on cashless options, or how to implement regulatory flexibility for allowing digital payments at the casino floors. There were some analysts from Eilers and Krejcik Gaming, which saw new fraud opportunities amid these options too. So from the regulatory perspective, what would be the best path forward and approach to these contactless or cashless payment options at the land-based casinos? What would be the best policies or regulations to be in place for this trend?
I think that's still going to be determined. I think every jurisdiction is going to have obviously their own regulations that address it differently, but I do think there would be some benefit for regulators to have at least a set of best practices. And I can assure you that through the UNLV International Gaming Institute and the International Center for Gaming Regulations, that regulators do communicate on a consistent basis with regard to best practices. In Nevada, we actually are members of an AML, anti-money laundering working group. And this includes law enforcement officials from the Metropolitan Police Department, Homeland Security, DEA, our local cities and their law enforcement divisions. And we also work with private industry to ensure that they are aware of investigations that are occurring, not detailed, but understanding the trends that they're seeing, so we can inform them of what trends that they may see from players on their gaming floor. We communicate with them. Well, we used to do it at least quarterly, but now with COVID, I don't think we've met since March. But I think that group, working with state officials and with federal officials, and we've had people from FinCEN also appear as well, it definitely helps us educate the industry as to what those best practices are, for whether it be BSA or IRS matters, CTRs and SARs. I think ensuring that there's consistent communication between the industry and law enforcement as to what our expectations are will hopefully help create more uniform principles when it comes to payments, and if we're moving from cash-based wagering.
Great, very clear. Maybe one of the last topics that I would like to address today is that we've recently talked to Stephen Crystal. He's the head of Betfred US Sports Development, and he said that the best innovations to provide entertainment will come from Las Vegas, but he also said that the US industry will move faster now to a more online gaming focused industry. I couldn't help thinking about the UNLV and Caesars partnership to open a new incubator, which opened in January. And there's also a program, the UNLV Lee Business School competition, to provide the initiative. So you think this crisis is speeding up innovation and eventually a landmark turn from a brick and mortar culture or reliance to a wider entertainment ecosystem and more online gaming focused industry in the US?
Actually, online gaming, in Nevada, we only have internet poker right now, and we are part of a multi-state agreement with New Jersey and Delaware right now with regard to that. And if, the Nevada legislature chooses to expand that to other online gaming, that is clearly within their policy right. And if it's expanded, we will definitely regulate that with no problem. I'm really glad you brought up actually the Lee Business School. There's a $1 million prize right now that's focusing on innovation and entrepreneurship. And I'm really happy to actually be a member of that prize committee. And some of the ideas that we've seen as part of that kind of contest have been great. And they're from, people of all different walks of life. There's actually international submissions that came in as well, but it's very creative because it's talking about how can we ensure that the consumer knows that they're going to be safe when we get back to a point where we're able to open conventions and shows, and being able to, track people to ensure that, okay, I shouldn't say track people, I meant in a better way to say, okay, there's a cluster of people here, they're not social distancing, which would allow the operator to go there. In conventions, being able to connect people via app to know that, okay, if these are your interests, whether it be online gaming or sports wagering, booths number 212 and 180 already have live demos on that. You can head to there now. Finding ways that people can have their full bodies disinfected before they walk into a facility, having kind of pop-up stations for healthcare. Those are the type of things that I think consumers are going to want to see and want before they come back to seeing shows and conventions. And I think I really give credit to the UNLV Lee Business School for putting up the money to have that prize and having it in Las Vegas, knowing that we are going to remain to be the hub for gaming and hospitality. So we haven't decided on the winners yet, but that will likely happen in the next month or two.
Great. Also talking about innovation, we've talked to Rahul Sood, who's the CEO of Unicorn, one of the most important esports betting companies. And Nevada has been approving even esports events for wagers this year. Sood said that if traditional operators don't force a new type of innovation that includes esports, they won't be here in 10 years from now. So how's the process to approve these events, these esports events, and if you were able to get any feedback from these events so far, and what would be your approach and expectations for this industry, this esports industry, maybe that opens a new relationship with land-based casinos as well?
Well, we have an actual esports arena at one of our larger licensees in the Luxor, and we also have, I think, an esports lounge in a downtown property as well. I think it's the Grand. And so I think Las Vegas was definitely kind of ahead of the curve in trying to create an esports environment where people will enjoy and play and be able to, go to the gaming floor, go eat, and then come and maybe not only play in an esports tournament, but actually watch people playing. And so Nevada has definitely embraced that. And about 3 years ago, we allowed our regulations to include wagering on esports as part of our other events in our regulation 22. We also entered into an MOU with the Esports Integrity Commission in an effort to better evaluate esports and have specific metrics to measure the integrity of organizations involved in esports. And ESIC, that Integrity Coalition, has definitely partnered with a lot of larger tournaments and held trainings with them, and that's very, very important. But with regard to esports, it's still going to be, in the request to wager on esports is based on demand. And I can tell you, as of last year, I think the regulation was passed in 2017. We probably had less than 5 requests from 2017 into 2020 to actually be able to wager on esports tournaments. Now, when things closed in March, I probably had 5 requests to wager on esports and tournaments in that 3-month period. But with, I think, more traditional sports now, with baseball and basketball coming back, I've definitely seen a dip in requests to wager on esports tournaments, but it is definitely based on demand. And as those have come through, we've made sure they've had the proper integrity protocols, and we've allowed wagers from them. And so it kind of ebbs and flows. There hasn't been a consistent request. I really can't say there have been 5 every month. I think there's probably less than 12 total since we've allowed wagering on esports. So it's really based on market demand. And as always, we will definitely talk to our race and sports books, see what the needs are, see what the issues are, and try to make wagering on these events possible. But we just haven't seen a huge demand in that as of yet.
Very clear. Well, unless you want to have a final word about what's lying ahead for the global gaming industry, not only in Nevada but in the US, we will thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll speak soon in a future Shogunet video interview.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.